Welcome to the TufFish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Judith Keim. Judith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I was delighted when you got in touch because it's always nice to meet people in the business and to talk to other writers and authors.
Oh, I'm so glad you said yes. I just thought we would have such a fun conversation, and I would love to start with asking you, how'd you get into writing?
Oh my gosh. I suppose like every other author, you've always been fascinated with books, with reading and writing. And I've written stories as a little kid. When I was young, my sister and I played librarian. And it's always been of interest. My mother read probably, I'm saying 2 or 3 books a week. And so we always were drawn to reading stories.
I love that so much. So was there something in your career path or your background that kind of helped meander your way to writing your first book?
Well, I wrote my first book a long time ago, and but I didn't publish. I'm both self-published and with a publisher. So I didn't have a book come out, or a publisher didn't take my work until 2015. And by then I had had a lot of jobs. My husband and I moved around a lot. And I personally think that has helped provide a lot of background on different jobs, different places to live, different kinds of people. And so it's all worked out well. But there were frustrating years when I did submit to New York and got the thanks but no thanks letter, but which we all get, I understand. And it can be discouraging. But I think also my stories are really like romantic women's fiction. And I don't think that sort of became an acceptable category, if you want to say, until the last few years. And so I would send things in, and it wasn't a romance. It wasn't serious women's fiction. It was lighthearted. So by the time that I decided I would self-publish, then other publishers became interested. But I really like self-publishing.
You've mentioned a few things I would love for you to touch on, one of which is the blending of the genres. I like that you did that. And I like that you stayed true to your voice and followed your own path and found a way to make what was important to you come to life. So self-publishing was a way for you to do that until other things took shape. But what was the appeal about women's fiction?
I love women and their stories and their willingness to band together to help one another. I think, I don't know how to say this right. I think that women are very strong and that we have a lot to offer and to offer each other as well. And we come together easily. We're more social than men are. And I think we're at a very good stage sort of in our development, don't you think?
I think that's really cool. I just think that I just think it's really cool that that's the path that you wanted to take, and just the inspiration to get there and seeing so much beauty. I love that. What helped you to pursue self-publishing? Like, how did you go about stepping into a self-publishing path?
I went to a meeting, and the speaker was a woman who had just begun self-publishing. This was new, and the meeting was in October of 2014. And she talked, she told us exactly what she did, and she talked and said, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I had just ended a horrible part-time job with a difficult woman who owned a store.
Mm.
And so I was sort of at a wonderful time to investigate. So I started putting a couple of my children's books up, and people like them. So then I thought, okay, I'll put up a couple of my women's fiction stories, and people love them. And I had a backlog, which, by the way, for anybody who's starting out and wants to get into that, it's very helpful if you have 2 or 3 books ready to go at once, because then you can get them out one by one by one, which gives you a boost and probably a credibility that you're not just a one book author. So luckily I had the backlist, and then when I realized they wanted more and more and more, I was putting up books and writing just as fast as I could. And thankfully, I'm very grateful that people do like what I write.
I think that's lovely. What was it like shifting genres then? Because of having written multiple genres, children's, women's fiction, kind of different, similar target market in the sense that women typically will buy children's books, but in the same breath, children's books are for different reader. What was that like switching genres?
Well, I always sort of wrote both genres, and I love children's books, but marketing children's books is very different from women's fiction. And really, I think one of the things writers want to decide when they get started is to pick a genre they like and know that if your readers like it, that is what you're going to be writing for the rest of your career. So you really want to write what you love and love to write. So for me, that's romantic women's fiction.
So when you're writing multiple books like you are, so you write one, it's going through one iterative process, perhaps. Do you have a second book already started, like in one draft where the other book is in a process? Would you talk a little bit about what that dynamic or that process looks like?
Sure. I tend to write in series. So let's say with a 3-book series, I could have it written. And, you know, it's nice to say, wow, I've written this book, but that's just the beginning, because then you have to go through the editing process. My husband is a line editor. I hire a content editor. And of course, I'm editing. So probably each of my books goes through, I would say, 10 to 12 different edits. And it's always coming back to me. I send it out, they come back to me, I fix, it goes on to somebody else, it comes back to me, it goes back to them, and so on. So that's ongoing. So while that's happening, I'm definitely writing the next book in the series. And because I write usually trilogies, but they end up to be 4 often. I'm always connected with those characters. And when you write a series, you're putting threads in that first book, which must follow you through the next 2 or 3 books. So it's easiest for me to stay within that series until the last book is done. Now, when the last book is in process, I'm often thinking ahead to the next series.
So then how do, with all of that going on, which is quite impressive listening to you, what about marketing a book? So once the book 1 is published, book 2 is in the writing stage, book 3 has concept moving, but book 1 needs to be shared and talked about and marketed, if you will. And a lot of that does fall on the author, especially if it is self-published. But even if it's been traditionally published, there's still responsibilities do fall on the author. How do you manage those pieces? There's a lot of time management, obviously.
A lot. And as I said before, it's very exciting to finish that book. You type the end and you think, wow, this is it. No, you've only done a very small part of the process. So you write the book, you're editing, and you're introducing your book to your readers, you're on social media, you are in touch with other writers. The great thing about our industry and self-publishing and women authors especially, though, gosh, the guys are included too, we're very supportive of one another. So there's always help there. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered as you begin. There are different Facebook groups that are very helpful to writers, and especially those getting started. And so as you're setting up your own program, your own voice in the industry, there are lots of people to help you. And it's very important, I think, to take courses. There are several different people who provide excellent courses on how you get started in marketing, and along with writing courses, of course. But there are many, many things available to you, and you do, I would think, want to take advantage.
I love that. And because you've been talking about series and we've been having that conversation, there's some more questions I have for you as it relates to that. One of which is, when you're thinking about your cover designs, how, because it is a series, and although each book will have its own design, what do you do to have continuity so that that trilogy, or potentially 4 books, but how do you do something to help show that they belong together?
Oh yes, I have a wonderful book cover designer. People love my covers, and she knows, and any book cover person that you hire would know, that you have to have continuity in this series. And I'd love to, when I come up with a concept for a new series, I love to have the titles in place and know pretty much at least who's going to be featured in each book. And I very often like to have my covers way ahead. That sort of gives me inspiration. And Lou Harper is the book cover designer for me, and she does a wonderful job.
Oh, I love that. I love that the covers gives the inspiration as well, just kind of adds to what you're writing.
I know I'm committed. If I have a book cover, I'm committed.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about the series again, and to your point, the characters showing up, how do you go about developing? Are there tips you would suggest for developing characters?
Yes, I think in my case, because it's a series, it's usually 3 women. They come together for some reason, and they each have their own problems that they have to solve. One time, a writer who I respect was giving a little talk, and she told the group, within the first page or 2, you must declare what it is that character wants. And then you go about making it a problem for her to get that wish. So she's always, this is what she wants, and this is her journey. She's going to go on, she's going to go for it, but she's going to have problems along the way. And with a series, each of the women comes together, whether they're sisters or cousins, and then each has their own story to tell. So in the first book of the series, you're introduced to all 3 of the main characters. However, one of them has a larger role than the other and others. And then the next 2 books feature the other 2 characters. But you're always getting the stories of all 3 as you go through the series.
Nice, nice, very cool. Now, I know that you have not only written books on your own, just like we've been talking, but you also have been a part of anthologies. Would you talk about what that process was like?
That is harder than you think. I'm in two different groups, and one was something that we started out with thinking. We met at a conference. We all loved each other's work and said, wouldn't it be fun to write something together? So we just knew it would be a Christmas story. It would be about sisters. And as it turns out, it was about four girls who are adopted by a woman who is facing her first Christmas alone after a tragedy to her husband and child. So it's a very sentimental story. They're beautiful, everybody loves them, but we had no idea how difficult it would be because we had all of the sisters at the same place at the same time. So one of the gals, Violet Howe, it was a former wedding coordinator. She had to work up a huge Excel spreadsheet so that when we talked about each character doing something, we'd have to figure out which day is it? What is the weather like? Because some would have them snowed in while others are outside and the sun is shining. And then we had to coordinate places and time of events and so on, so that if they were at the same event at the same time, everything was coordinated. So we've laughed about it ever since because it was so much more difficult than we thought, but the end result has been great. I'm in another group where it's 10 authors who have put together a collection, and each book was already written and we don't have to coordinate anything. And that has been a joy. But each of them are wonderful reads, but I would caution somebody in wanting to do an anthology to not have everybody at the same place at the same time.
So to your point about the spreadsheet, and it sounds like it was almost scene by scene or chapter by chapter. Here's what's going on. Here's where we're moving the plots. Here's what characters are there. Here's what is happening. And to your point, location, scenery, that kind of thing. Yeah. So did each author was each author responsible for a character, or was each author responsible for a chapter, but then blending from the previous chapters to move into the next? How did you all divide up the work in that structure? Because it sounds like with the second book, the second anthology, it was here's the theme and everybody can contribute so that we're all under the same theme and umbrella, maybe even similar characters, but different points. But this was more integral. How did you all divide that work?
We each had the right to our own story. So we were writing a story about our character and what was happening to her at this location. The sisters all come to this ski lodge for their one of the sisters' wedding, but the wedding is called off at the last minute. Oh. So there's lots of trauma about what is going on with each of the sisters at the ski lodge. So we would definitely had our own stories and so on, but we had to tie it in to who was where, when, what the weather was like, etc.
I love that so much. I think that the creativity to go into that and to help, I mean, because I've co-authored a book before and we really had a good time working on our story, our book itself, but it was just two of us. So, and it was nonfiction. So a different genre, different approach, different, and we went about it in a different way even, but I love listening to how you all did this with more people, more characters, more intricacies, really. I think that that's just so cool.
And we've become very good friends.
That's awesome. That is so, so cool. So with the second anthology where you're all contributing and it's in a different way, how did you all go about coming up with the theme or coming up with the approach? What was that process like?
Well, we're all sort of writers of, let's say, romance or women's fiction or romantic women's fiction. So they're all books that any of our readers would enjoy having and reading. And again, we love the idea of women being friends. And so we've sort of become friends as we have worked on this. So it was easy to pull a group together that we felt readers would enjoy.
I think that's fantastic. Now I'm curious, Judith, do you also read the genre, or are there other genres that you read to help amplify your writing?
I try to do both. Read within my genre because I like it. And then there are others. I mean, there's so many good books out and so many wonderful authors. So I do try to make an effort to read a little bit in the afternoon.
So when you do, what other genres do you particularly like to read that you find when it's different than women's fiction or romantic women's fiction that you really enjoy, and it just feels like it helps your own creative process?
Well, I'm reading Grace Kelly's Dress.
Oh, cool.
At the moment. Yeah, and that's been really fun and good. And I'm trying to think of some of the other books that I've read. Mostly, regular fiction. I suppose it is women's fiction in a way, now that I think about it. But, Jodi Picoult, all sorts of authors. Kristen Hanna is fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, because I mean, I can hear where like reading in your genre is definitely a good thing to be doing, but sometimes you might read a mystery that really gives you some inspiration from a different way. And so it's a little different than the genre, but yet it's a creative way to find new ways to hone your own craft, really.
Yeah. And to watch movies on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And so on is helpful.
I do that too. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because again, it's reintroducing you to how they put together the story. And
yes.
Sometimes you like it and sometimes you don't, but still it's a learning experience.
I love that you say that because I see that too. I look at it sometimes a little more critically than I probably should be at times when I realize I'm going, oh, I like that introduction, or what about this with this, and almost kind of breaking it down versus just saying, just watch the movie, Jen, and just enjoy it versus like analyzing everything.
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious, have you ever faced when you're writing or as you're moving through the different processes that it's affectionately called imposter syndrome, or that negative chatter that can happen, that mean girl on the inside saying, who do you think you are? What is going on? What are you doing? And if you have, how did you overcome it? What kind of guidance would you give a writer who might be facing that?
That I felt that way about myself?
Yeah, or that you've dealt with it. Yeah.
Thinking what? That you weren't worthy?
Worthy, or even just more of, can I do this? Is this book going to be any good? That kind of thing. Or this writing, this was just yucky writing, and who's going to read this kind of a thing?
Oh, yeah. So if you're talking about during the process, oh, yeah, that can happen. And when I get through, I write pretty fast, and a lot of detail with characters and stuff. And I'm a pantser. So I start off with great enthusiasm and excitement, and I just can't wait to get into the story. And then because I don't really know where it's going, by the time I get to the middle, I think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What am I going to do with these characters? And then I soldier on and I get through, and then the book is turned over to an editor to my editor, and I always say at the end, I don't know if, do you think it's just stupid? And my husband will say, Judy, you say this every time and it never is. So, so I do doubt during the process. And then when you put your book out for release, it's always a nervous time. Or in my case, I turn it over to my advanced reader group. And, I wait anxiously to see what they have to say. But sure, we're all a little insecure, I think.
But how do you come through that? What helps you when you do face a moment? Because obviously you are successfully doing that, to continue to put out such beautiful work and to continue to have the enthusiasm to write series after series after series. So you've found a way to put that voice in a box very quickly, even when it does come up.
Yes, well, my readers help a great deal because I have received just beautiful letters from them saying how much the book has meant to them, or how the subject of the book has helped them cope with something. And that is very powerful. It does make you want to continue.
I love that. I'm so glad you got those. I think that that's wonderful, because you're right. When you get feedback like that, that does feel really good. Judith, thank you so, so much for this conversation. Where can people connect with you, and where can they get your books?
They can connect with me on my website, www.judithkeim.com. I have a section there where you can get in touch with me. I love to hear from other people, and I always answer myself. I'm, of course, on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, Nook, everywhere. All of my books, except for those in the anthologies, are on audio, and they're available everywhere. So I love to hear from you. And Jen had mentioned some of you are just starting out. So I do want to say, don't give up. There's hope for you. There's help for you. So move on.
I love that. Judith, thank you so, so much. And I know you mentioned something to me when we were chatting before the recording, and I'd love to make sure we capture this, that there's something special about the anthologies when they're purchased. Would you share that too?
I'm in one of the anthologies. 10 authors have come together with full-length books and made this group available to readers who will love all of the books. They're all different, but all warm, wonderful, nice books. I would guess for romance, for women's fiction, for clean romance. They'll meet all of those qualifications. And the proceeds from this collection are going to St. Jude's Hospital. So we wanted to do something for our readers, and we wanted to do something for St. Jude's. So I hope you'll look it up, and it's called Once Upon a Friendship.
I love it. Judith, thank you so, so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.